150 years ago this month, Dartmoor writer William Crossing left this house on the edge of South Brent to head out on a moorland walk. But it wouldn't be a simple stroll among the heather. Oh no. By the end of it, he would have covered over 30 miles, seen the sun rise twice, and visited just about every type of treasure Dartmoor had to offer. I also expect he made an enemy of his friend who he dragged along with him. This walk was so absurdly long and full of incident that it's gone down in Dartmoor legend, and Crossing himself would write it up years later under the title A Long Tramp in his book Amid Devonia's Alps. Who would be foolhardy enough to attempt to recreate this walk? Yep, Muggins here. Join me as I walk in the footsteps of the man who literally wrote the books on Dartmoor, the moor's greatest ever perambulator. And as I waddle through the ups and downs of the long tramp, I shall attempt to cleverly weave the story of Crossing's life into the journey. A life full of adventure, friendship, self-actualisation, obsession and tragedy. Welcome back to the Dartmoor podcast. On this particular August day in 1874, Crossing had a friend visiting from London, a man cryptically referred to as H in the book, but who shall henceforth be referred to as Humphrey, as it's the funniest H name. The night before their adventure, it seems, Crossing and Humphrey got a bit carried away celebrating and drinking, and midnight passed. Crossing advocated going to bed so that they could get the early start he desired, while Humphrey suggested that they have a few more bevies and compensate with a lie-in before a shorter walk. Then, in a flash of inebriated inspiration, they came up with a third option. Why go to bed at all? The nutters kept drinking until the small hours of the morning, then refreshed themselves with some strong coffee, and without any sleep at all, headed out onto the moor, heading north for Shipley Bridge, with the stars shining brightly and every promise of a fine day. As you can see, I'm a few hours behind. But there is a far more serious ingredient missing from my shoddy remake of Crossing's adventure. Company. And who would make a better companion for this long trek than a young man renowned for his Dartmoor knowledge and perambulating prowess? Friend of the podcast and living legend, Super Max Piper.
Yes, it's going to be a really good day. I'm looking forward to it.
It wasn't long before Max was pointing out features of interest along the way, with his seeming encyclopedic knowledge of Dartmoor's artefacts.
Up there we've got the trees of the whiskey and soda wood.
Whiskey and soda?
Yes.
It was clear that in this parody of the long tramp, I was the Humphrey.
So here we've got the Hunter's Stone.
Okay.
And this is inscribed with Masters of the Dartmoor Hunt, South Devon Hunt.
Okay.
It dates to the 19th century, I believe. And it's got Carew, Coreyton, and it's inscribed on all of its sides as well.
Yeah.
Paul Treby.
The first place Crossing showed his friend was the grounds of Brentmoor Villa, along the banks of the River Orme.
We're going to the head of this river.
Yeah. All the way.
Long old way on ahead.
Yeah.
Of particular interest was a small memorial to a young girl.
Brentmoor Villa. Just inside this, on a ledge of rock, amid the shrubs which have been planted here, and which in this sheltered hollow flourish so luxuriantly, a small pedestal of granite is observable. It was erected by the late proprietor of the villa in memory of his little daughter, and inscribed upon it are the following touching lines. Let's see if we can find them. I guess would be our first thing. Oi. Oh. Tell you
The
what,
poem
I can't
inscribed
read
on
that
the
at all.
monument was faded, and the garden
Very
was now
faint.
overgrown with rhododendron. The villa itself, now a ruin.
So what was this then? A villa, it says. So like a...
No, so the villa is further up.
Right.
So this is a natural granite outcrop, and it commemorates Mary Maynell, who was a young girl who sadly died due to laryngitis and tonsillitis
Right.
on the 27th of March 1863,
Right.
if I've got the date correct.
Bloody hell, but that's... You could get carried away by tonsillitis in those days.
I know. There are other stories saying that she drowned in the river and
Yeah.
that she dies in a riding accident, but those are not
Yeah.
true.
Ooh. That's about 6 new 365s today. Oh, that's given me an extra little sprig in my step,
Right,
knowing
nothing new
that.
for me, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Fine by me.
Have you got any left to do, or have you done them all?
Vixen Tor.
Oh, Vixen Tor, yeah. So this is it, is it? It's just
It
the
is,
villa.
yeah. There's a really impressive granite gatepost just alongside the villa here as well. This was quite an impressive manor.
Yeah.
Some description.
But was it already a ruin? No, it wasn't,
No,
presumably.
it was, I think, 1970s
Right,
or 80s.
so he would have been
This would have been a fully functioning building in Crossing's
Yeah.
time.
probably sneaking past while they were all just waking up.
You probably
in the
knocked on
morning.
the door.
Yeah, I probably did. Hello. Three hours behind him at this point.
Well, he didn't have this nice road.
Yeah.
He had to walk on the moor here.
Yeah.
Max and I took our first rest on a convenient bench and took stock of just how far behind Crossing we were.
The sun was just rising, gliding the hilltops, diffusing a warm glow around. Everything near us but the rippling river at our feet was calm and still, and that quiet, almost inexpressible feeling which is only to be experienced at the dawning of a summer's morn upon the moorlands stole over us. We've got catching up to do.
We have. Because obviously we can't follow the river because we've got a big reservoir in the way.
Yeah, okay, so there's a reservoir in the way now. Leaving the Avon and following the first named stream. Don't know quite what that means necessarily. We made our way to Huntington Warren House. And calling in, we're welcomed in true Dartmoor fashion. Well, let's see
He certainly skips about a lot.
welcome us in. Yeah, so we need to go.
Basically,
We just follow this up, basically.
up
don't we?
Huntington Cross.
Yeah.
Because we do cross a couple of streams. We cross Smallbrook and Brock Hill Stream.
Okay, yeah.
We cross those two.
With our journey in its infancy, it was time to reflect on how Crossing's childhood would have been in the early 19th century. Crossing was born, part of a well-off and well-connected family, in Plymouth in 1847. He spent a lot of time in his family's holiday cottage on Roborough Down, from where, encouraged by his mother, he developed a love of exploring Dartmoor. His father ran a business making sailcloth, in which on leaving school he attempted to apprentice his son. But young William was much more interested in other matters. He didn't want to be sewing, he wanted adventure. A little too much adventure, as it turned out, as he found himself on a sailing expedition to Canada where his ship was almost crushed by an iceberg. To this, young William said nope and returned to Dartmoor. Taking advantage of a tarmac track, we steamed up and round Avon Dam. Neither the path nor the dam would have been present in Crossing's time.
We'd just still be walking along the river at this point, I guess.
Correct.
Wow.
And what's interesting is there's a prehistoric settlement down there. I think there are tinners huts as well.
What's sunken underneath it?
Yeah. And there's an old blowing house at Brock Hill Foot.
On returning to Devon, William's father Jacob, hoping perhaps that his son's close shave of an iceberg had scared some sense into him, tried again to get him to take a position of responsibility. William Crossing was put in charge of sail manufacturing in South Brent. A big mistake putting him so close to the moor. Young Crossing was freer than ever to wander off and explore when he should be keeping an eye on business. And when he wasn't rambling over the moor, he was indulging in amateur dramatics, writing short plays and setting up a small theatre in the village.
5 miles in.
Hey, that's like a sixth of
So
what
we're,
I'm doing.
or fifth for me. There's a heap of sinners to the right.
Heap of Sinners.
Yeah,
It's an ominous name.
it is. Lots of scary names in this area. And then Piper's Beam is down here somewhere as well.
Ah, Piper's Beam.
Yeah.
There you go. Any relative?
Don't know.
Max left me for dead on the first big climb of the day as we approached Huntington Warren Farm.
quite a big warren at its height.
Yeah, so that's literally for breeding rabbits then, right?
The wonderful incongruous sycamore and a few scattered lumps of stone were all that remained, and I was a little jealous of Crossing, who in his day was welcomed in for a cuppa. As Max jokingly mentioned a few times on our trek, Crossing seemed to have a habit of just knocking on people's doors and letting himself in.
We made our way to Huntington Warren House, and calling in were welcomed in true Dartmoor fashion and pressed to partake of some homely cheer. Well,
Not sure we're going to get the same.
yeah. It was now close upon 7 o'clock in the morning. Hitherto so bright and fair became thickly overcast, and a dense mist arose, obscuring everything from view. We stayed at the Warren House for some time. Well, we're 10 to 10, so... But if he stayed here a while and we're only to stay here 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then...
Well, yeah.
Then we're catching him up. We'll catch you, Crossing.
But there were more pressing issues than getting refreshments. The most difficult and dangerous part of the route was before us. Orne Head.
This is the... Okay, this is the tricky bit next, isn't it? I was bound first for Orne Head, as I wished H to see the source of this stream. So on leaving the house I passed up through the warren, having the Weller Brook on my right hand, until I reached some ancient mine workings, which H was interested in examining. From here, instead of making straight for Orne Head, the intervening ground being not the best to travel over, especially in the mist, I pursued a course by which I struck the river below Fish Lake, and we then followed it to its source.
So I understood that as being Ryder's Mire.
Let's So he's heading for Orne Head, he said.
Yes.
But instead of walking straight there, what's he saying? Aimed for the bottom of Fish Lake.
Fish Lake Mire here. So this is where Fish Lake enters the Orne.
Yeah.
Or the Avon.
Yeah.
And there's a lovely tinner set up here which I'd like to visit actually.
Right.
It's a shame that he takes that route. If he'd said, oh, we've gone over Riders Hill, that'd be so much easier.
Yeah.
Because there's a great track from Riders Hill to Orne Head. There's also a track that follows this wall
Okay.
to Riders Mire.
Yeah.
There's nothing, this doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
There's nothing north of, we have to get to Riders Mire somehow
Yeah.
and then deal with that. And then generally hugging the riverbank is not going to be so bad. The route that calls to me is to get to Broad Falls via Heap of Sinners. But he doesn't mention Heap of Sinners.
No.
He mentions these mine workings.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably aim for that wall instead.
Yeah.
And then follow that.
Yeah.
Even though, because, well, it's the way he went. We've got to try and keep...
Yeah.
We've got to make a decision at Hexworthy.
Just why William Crossing wanted to show Humphrey the most treacherous and sodden mire on the moor, I'm not sure, especially when a lovely path and a wonderful view presented an alternative along Riders Hill. But Max and I were sworn to follow his route as closely as possible. While he should have been managing his sailcloth business, Crossing spent his days exploring Dartmoor. And by all accounts, he was an incredibly popular and charismatic chap, capable of improvising rhymes about his day's adventure and using his love of drama to spin a tale. He was welcome at every door, even though he also played the tin whistle.
It looks better walking on the other side, doesn't it? For the moment, at least.
I mean, my main concern is obviously Riders Mire is on that side.
Yeah.
So it might be wise to cross. Perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's entirely
It looks
awkward.
like it's quite an easy one to hop back and two across if we need to, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, you haven't seen what I'm like.
The swampy ground and infant Orne was everything we expected. Horrible going.
You don't see it around here.
No, this is it's not one of Dartmoor's most popular visitors' attractions.
No.
Come to Dartmoor, visit Orne Head.
Yeah.
But there was some method in Crossing's madness. On his walk they were shrouded in thick fog, so there would be no view from Riders Hill anyway, and by finding the stream and following it, Crossing was able to navigate his way northwards without the use of a map and compass. And as Max and I struggled through the swamp, so Crossing's early career was marred in difficulty. The theatre business failed to take off, and the sail-making company went out of business. I should probably point out here, though, that this was not entirely due to Crossing's lackadaisical approach to management. The age of steam was beginning, and sail-making would have been a bad investment, even for the sharpest of entrepreneurs.
We in the wrong place?
Still not halfway yet over there, still got ages to go.
Oh well, I guess there's an element that he's as well showing off to his mate a bit of everything, isn't he? He's saying, look, we've got this kind of bog land on Dartmoor, we've got this, we got that. So would it be a proper Dartmoor walk if you don't end up in a bog at some point? I suppose not.
Well, I mean, Orne Head, if you really want to experience Dartmoor, go to Orne Head.
Dartmoor on all its savagery. It's not too bad over there. Oh, whoa! I spoke way too soon then. Ah, wet foot. Yeah, whose idea was this?
Yours.
With 2 wet feet, both mine, and almost 10 miles under our belts, Max and I sat down for a rest by the Luckham Stone at Orne Head.
What did you say this was called? Is that the name?
Luckham Stone.
Luckham Stone.
There was some comfort, though, in the fact that we were making excellent time, and the most awkward part of our journey was, hopefully, already behind us. Next stop were the mine workings of Houghton Wheels, up and over the bleak and featureless Sker Hill.
Spin the map.
A fair bit of downhill, actually.
Oh my.
Yeah, so what I was... Because if you look north of Orne Head, you can see there's Sker Gut,
Yes.
and there's also Houghton Wheels. I'm thinking we just take a bearing to Houghton Wheels.
Yep, I think that's right. That's north we're heading. Over there somewhere.
Sort of, yeah.
And presumably we're going to pop out.
Houghton Wheels, hopefully. So we'll,
Yeah.
because it's quite a
We'll see
straight
it.
valley.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see it.
Yeah, Sandy Way is literally just there. It's very obvious, but we're not taking that. So.
Crossing posits that the name is a corruption of wooden wheels, with wheels being an old West Country word for a mine. And one of Crossing's gifts to us people of the future is his extensive knowledge of Dartmoor place names and their etymology, gathered not only through reading, but by getting mud on his boots and quizzing the old men of the moor. Without the distraction of employment, Crossing was able to focus on Dartmoor full time. He began to note down his routes and rambles and furnished his writings with the historical knowledge gleaned from the locals. Perhaps he could make a living from publishing his adventures. He married and settled down in South Brent and joined both the Dartmoor Preservation Association and the Devon Association. This was William's prime, and the period in which he partook in the long tramp that Max and I were attempting to recreate today.
I like to think of it as being the Oak Brook because further downstream there are lots of oaks.
That makes some sense. Thought he was coming for us for a second.
I did.
After surviving a charge from a psychotic sheep, we stopped for a brief rest at Horsford Cross, a monument that wouldn't be discovered until about a decade after Crossing's epic hike, buried in the heather down by the river. One of Crossing's great contributions to all us Dartmoor lovers was his restoration and preservation of the ancient crosses.
Lovely cross.
It was in his name, after all. Many of these wonderful monuments had been stolen by farmers to make gateposts or parts of a wall over the previous centuries, and Crossing seemingly had the authority to demand they put them back. We pressed onwards towards the Forest Inn at Hexworthy, one of Crossing's favourite haunts, and where they would have had a much-needed rest and a bit of the hair of the dog. I was looking forward to it too. I was badly in need of a cuppa, being a bit of a tea addict and having forgone my brew kit to save on weight for the long tramp. So imagine my disappointment and finding they don't open Mondays.
sorry, we're closed. Okay. Oh well.
Still, Max and I wouldn't let it get us down. We are men of stoic and indomitable spirit.
This would clearly be the bit where his mate would be like,
I've had enough.
yeah, this is a lovely walk, Bill, really enjoying it, but how are we getting home? Have we come round to the big loop? Are we nearly back?
Yeah.
You're like, just thinking like, no, the quickest way back would be to go all the way you just came.
Yeah.
And he has no intention of even doing that, he's just going to keep going.
We simply sat on the nearby Jubilee stone, where I wrang out my socks and ate my emergency sandwich.
That's a bad sign. I'm able to actually wring water out of those socks.
Oh,
Oh, come on.
I just can't believe you've got wet feet. I mean, you really did go down though.
I did go down and I did one on each foot at different points. Yeah. Oh, it's disgusting.
I also took this opportunity to quiz Max on a few of the finer details of the latter stages of the journey. You see, Super Max would be leaving me for the final straight, as he had work the next day and the last bus to get him home departed from Princetown around 6 p.m.
I've always wanted to
From
go down to
Downtor,
it, I've not been.
you can see. Oh, the views are great.
Yeah,
From
but it
Downtor.
might be dark.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, if you're going to do this today, you crazy boy.
Oh, well, if I can,
Yeah.
we'll see. He says, I know of no more interesting view in the whole of Dartmoor than is to be obtained from the door of the Forest Inn at Hexworthy.
Really?
Grander and more romantic ones there certainly are, and it possesses of course none of the extreme wildness that is to be seen in the desolate portions of both the north and south quarters, nor can it be said on account of the number of enclosures around to form a truly representative picture of Dartmoor scenery, but for interest and beauty and an exhibition of the mingling of wildness with the efforts of the cultivator, none can surpass it within the bounds of the moor. In the valley the West Dart is seen sweeping round a low hill. No, it's not. There's trees in the way.
At the Forest Inn, Crossing recounts a little anecdote that reveals how out of his comfort zone poor Humphrey was. Apparently he was absent-mindedly rattling his tankard on the table, not realising that this was a local signal that you want a refill. This annoyed the landlady no end, as she kept poking her head in and asking what they wanted, eventually slamming a bell on the table and telling them to use that instead. Crossing's route from this point onwards seems to go a little bit haywire. He's pretty vague on how he got down to the Dart, probably as he took a shortcut across some fields, and then he describes himself and Humphrey simply leaping in and wading across the river rather than seeking a proper crossing place.
We bent our steps through Hexworthy and passing over the new takes descended to the Dart. The river was swollen by recent rains and no place where we might cross by leaping from rock to rock presented itself. Higher up there are stepping stones, but these would have been covered, so high had the river risen. So not wishing to lose any time, we selected the spot and waded through the stream, the water reaching considerably above our knees. Then he says, at a short distance above the confluence of the Swinkham River with the Dart, below which we crossed, there is now a wooden footbridge or clam, but this did not exist at the time of writing. So basically, I think we can just take our pick, can't we? As long as we're below the confluence of the Swinkham,
So,
just try and find a place to cross.
so can I have a look at that?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
I'm very confused.
As the river wasn't flowing as high as it was on the original journey, we decided to forego the wading and stick with Crossing's original plan, which was to use the stepping stones upriver.
Okay. Because that's like, he said he would have done that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anything, we are staying even more true to his intentions than he was. There you go. That's the way you can spin that. Yeah, stepping stones it is. So how is there is there a footpath along the river? Is there?
Right away.
Oh right, okay, brilliant.
So you need to go over to Wide Meat.
I see it. Yeah. Okay. And the stepping stones there, and up by Brownberry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that looks good.
Max and I were developing a new theory about the walk we were on. Was it really a pub crawl in disguise? Certainly the way Crossing seems to change direction frequently from this point, and makes all sorts of bizarre navigational decisions, implies that the Dartmoor ale might have been affecting his judgment. In the most joyous and carefree way, of course.
So Crossing kind of goes a little bit all over the place from here to the Tor. So.
What this actually documents, this book, is William Crossing losing his mind. He's like you say, he's on it to here. So he sort of like
He's
makes
he's
sense.
kind of forgotten where he went.
Yeah. Maybe he had a few too many drinks at the Forest Inn.
Well,
If you
I think
think
you're right there.
if you think about it, he'd stayed up all night.
Yeah.
They had hangovers. He'd been drinking. Maybe he just pushed it a little bit too far, and he's just
Perhaps.
wasn't maybe making the best decisions at this point.
No, I don't think he would have been.
But then again, who's the bigger fool?
Us following him.
Yeah, us then
Yeah.
knowing that, then sort of trying to follow in his footsteps. So
He literally could have lied about the entire trip.
yeah,
He's a good storyteller. I mean, this is the same guy who wrote a book about tales of the Dartmoor pixies.
you're right.
So,
Yeah, maybe we should take it with a pinch of salt.
Max set his usual ferocious pace through the picturesque village of Hexworthy, and we skipped across the Dart without incident. And, in a nice mirroring of the original Tramp, the weather brightened up for us too, necessitating a brief stop in the judge's chair at Dunnabridge Pound to apply sun cream. I didn't notice until later, but this spot is the photo on the front cover of the book I was carrying. At his peak, Crossing produced some of the most accurate and useful guides to traversing the moor, and wrote a great number of engaging articles about all things Dartmoor. He was the authority on the history of the monuments and keeper of all the local gossip, as well as the life and soul of many a gathering.
You walk so fast. Can I match him for footsteps? He's just got such a long stride. It's good, it's keeping me going. These cows staring us down.
did you meet William Crossing?
Have you seen two men in tweed suits go this way?
Which way did he go?
Anyway, the next official stop was the sheepfold up on Laughter Tor, a curious rectangular enclosure that was jokingly said to be used to measure sheep. Crossing relays the story that the exact number of sheep that could be squeezed into the area was known, so that the farmer needn't count them. A funny idea, anyway.
Definitely not true.
No.
And finally, a Tor. At first, Max and I wondered why Laughter Tor had been chosen rather than the more obvious and beautiful Belvoir Tor to our northwest. But among the blooming August heather, we were treated to wonderful views all around, including the view of the aforementioned Belvoir Tor.
Okay, that's not bad, is it?
Maybe that crossing bloke did know what he was doing after all.
It's the Dartmoor Pony Heritage Trust.
And Max had a hidden surprise to show me here too.
Got a lovely sort of scattering of heather and stuff around it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's very picturesque. All right. It's not even that subtle, really, is it?
No, it's not. But from the other side, you wouldn't notice.
Yeah. So do we know where that's nicked from?
No. Well, there might be some information online. I can't
Yeah.
recall.
Wow.
But
So that's a Dartmoor cross from somewhere.
been used in part
William-
of the new take wall.
William Crossing would be furious.
He was.
He'd be onto that farmer. Go and put it back.
It was time for us to duck into Belvoir Forest and head towards Postbridge. This plantation would have been completely absent in Crossing's time, and this would have been more of a riverside walk for him and his friends. But in the growing heat of the afternoon, I was glad of the shade thrown by the brooding conifers, especially as I was now struggling to match Max's pace. Here, Crossing relates the story of Snaily Cottage, which you would have been able to see on the far bank of the river. If you're interested in that strange tale, I covered it a few months ago in my episode, The World's Biggest Slug.
Yeah.
We briefly stopped, as our Victorian counterparts did, at Belaford Bridge.
18 miles.
And it's testament to Crossing's knowledge and nosiness that he knew exactly who had vandalised the old Clapper Bridge here. A pair of naughty children skipping school, who, Crossing relates with glee, were roundly beaten for their misdemeanours. I was beginning to flag, and Max's fluorescent form was more and more frequently disappearing into the distance. But though I might be outstripped by Piper, I refused to be defeated by Crossing. After all, he did this walk in a tweed suit after no sleep, so I'd be ashamed to be outdone. That said, it was the week of my 40th birthday, and Billy Crossing was only 27 when he undertook this marathon. Max... well, let's not talk about how old Max is. I refuse to believe any adult could be born after the year 2000. After scooting across another clapper, we finally made it to Postbridge. And finally my prayers were answered. An open pub and a cup of tea. Looking like the two coolest dudes on Dartmoor, Max and I assessed our weary state.
Famous last words, but I don't think I'm getting any blisters or anything.
Good.
That's good.
Brilliant.
I've got some of those super duper blister plaster
Yeah,
things.
I do. I never
They're
use
good, aren't
them.
they?
I used to get them all the time, but these boots, I've not had any issues.
Also, over the years, your feet just get so tough, don't they?
Oh, we've
Doing
got no
all the
choice, have
walking.
they?
Yeah. Toughen up or fall off.
Yeah.
I was initially unsure if this was the exact place that Crossing and Humphrey stopped at, but again, Max's knowledge put us right.
On arriving here, we entered the House of Entertainment, now a temperance house, but at that time, for several years afterwards, being known as the Greyhound
Well,
Inn.
this was known as a Temperance Hotel.
Oh, right, okay. So maybe it was the Greyhound Inn, then it was Temperance House, then it was
Yeah.
Temperance Hotel, and now it's the East Star Inn. Because you can't really have a pub called the Temperance
No.
pub, can you?
No.
And while resting ourselves, talked upon matters pertaining to the neighbourhood with a Mormon whom we found there. We need to find a Mormon.
Right, okay, we might struggle with that.
We could not, however, permit ourselves to stay long as it was now getting late in the afternoon.
Yes, it is.
We had by this time covered several miles since setting out. That's an understatement of the century. That's several miles. Just, what, 19 we're on,
What do you
are we?
19.4?
90.4. Leaving Postbridge, we turned southwestward on the road to Princetown, which we followed for nearly 2.5 miles.
What a stupid idea that was.
We turned aside and passing up the slope of Crockern Tor, which is not very far
I
from
think
home.
we should just follow the road.
Yeah.
Because it is the quickest route, and it is in keeping with...
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do it.
I finished up what was possibly the best cup of tea I've ever drank, had a stretch, and readied myself for the next leg. Although the cuppa had given me a new lease of life, the long slog along the road was a tough one, where we literally passed milestone after milestone as we marched on the hard tarmac under the hot sun. This may have been a less dreadful route for Crossing, who would not have had to leap into the verge to avoid automobiles in 1874. It doesn't take a genius to see that Crossing's life was headed for trouble. His obsession with the moor, although making him popular and happy, wasn't making him a fortune. Although his family had been wealthy, they weren't so wealthy that he could sustain his life of leisure. His road was running out. With now over 20 miles stomped, Max and I reached Crockern Tor.
Never been so happy to see Crockern Tor.
In many ways the centre of the moor, where the old Stannery Parliament used to meet to pass their mining laws, and where the spirit of old Crockern, Dartmoor's deity, reputedly resides. And here was where I had to say goodbye to Max.
Right, but no, seriously, it's been really good.
Yeah, it's been great.
Much appreciated.
Interesting, and hopefully
Oh, God.
giving you a bit of an appreciation for that man William Crossing. That, well, not that you didn't have one already, but just seeing what he could do physically is ridiculous.
And 150 years ago,
yeah.
It's just a crazy amount of time.
Absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Cheers, George.
I'll see you again, and it will be less painful, whatever
I
we
hope
do.
so.
As I remarked to him at the time, I would have struggled without him, and probably would still be floundering around in Ornhead Mire, looking for the Sandy Way path, had he not been there to guide me and set the pace.
Bye-bye. Still a long way to go as well.
Here was a very apt place for Crossing and Humphrey to stop. The legend of old Crockern is that no one shall make any money out of Dartmoor. He'll tear out your pockets. When Crossing left his home on the long tramp in 1874, he was well off enough to have a manservant, called George nonetheless, but by the 1890s he was struggling to make ends meet, and had to resign his positions with the DPA and DA as he couldn't even afford the annual fee. He was forced to move to smaller and cheaper accommodation, first in Ivybridge, then Mary Tavy. His health was ailing too, with those long cold stomps across the moor no doubt contributing to the terrible rheumatism that would afflict him into his later years. Next, Crossing wanted to show Humphrey a real Dartmoor gem, Wistman's Wood, as dwarfish, strange and gnarled now as it was then. There was a nice irony in Crossing's description of the haunting Wistman's Wood, where he says, "You cannot walk in there as you might get hurt by slipping on the moss. Nowadays you cannot walk there as you might slip and hurt the moss." Just one of the attitude changes that have occurred in the last century and a half. Making a selection of old man noises as the various pains began to creep into my knees and toes, I hobbled back towards the road away from the mystical wood. The sun was getting lower, casting deeper shadows in the valleys of the moor and ringing the tops with a golden halo of light. Crossing's next stop was the Two Bridges Hotel, where he and Humphrey paused briefly to watch a wrestling match between some locals beside the river. 2024 cut a much more serene scene, and instead of a couple of chaps locked in combat, I had to make do with a gaggle of geese chilling on the lawn, after seemingly demolishing a tray of drinks. As tempting as a beverage in the evening sun was, I wanted to keep moving. The next stretch was a horrible bit of road across to the next village, and I wanted to get it out of the way as quickly as possible, then reward myself, as Crossing and his friend had done, with a pint, or several, in the Plume of Feathers in Princetown. And just as I was cursing the gradient and narrowness of the Dartmoor roads, a car pulled over and shouted, "It's not a podcast out the window." A nice chap called Dave had come to my rescue and dropped me down the road.
Bye then, thank you so much.
I don't consider this cheating, as I'm sure Crossing would have done the same. Anyway, my joy at being recognised like some sort of minor celebrity was short-lived.
I didn't tell you it's closed.
Another closed pub. Luckily, Princetown has two pubs, so although I couldn't be entirely authentic to Crossing's resting spot here, I could at least be authentic to his spirit and finally have a beer. At the time, in the garden of the Prince of Wales, this cool glass of the local drop felt like the best beer I've ever had.
That was possibly the best pint I've ever had in my life.
Yes, I just said that. Despite finding a little bit of work as a tutor in later life, Crossing's financial situation didn't improve, and on his 70th birthday, a public subscription, basically a charity whip round, was made for him with a few noteworthy benefactors chipping in, including the Reverend Sabin Baring Gould and Eden Philpotts. By 1921, though, the crossing's poverty was so great that his wife Emma passed away in the Tavistock workhouse. Invigorated by the ale, I continued on my way. The path south towards Seward's Cross, which Crossing inexplicably wanted to show Humphrey even though it was almost dark, was straight and flat and well surfaced and mostly downhill. I was, however, beginning to worry about where I was going to sleep.
Right. While that pint is seeping into me, I'm beginning to think about where I'm going to sleep now. Crossing slept in the porch of the Dowsland barn, and that's it's like a hotel now. I don't think they're going to let me sleep in their porch, and I don't have the gab to blag it, I don't think. So instead I'm looking for a Crossing-esque place to sleep. I have no mat, no sleeping bag, no bivvy bag, nothing like that. I've just got the Lavoo jumper, waterproofs, which I wouldn't normally do. That's not me trying to be all like, hey, I just sleep out with minimal equipment like one of these survival goons. No, I like to camp comfortably. But just because of the distance today, I couldn't really take the stuff. And also I'm spurred on by the fact that William Crossing didn't take a load of camping stuff. You know, didn't bother him, why should it bother me, right? But now that bravado is getting a bit like, oh, I'm going to be really uncomfortable. Where am I going to sleep? Anyway, I've come up with 3 possible solutions, depending on how far my little legs will take me. What if no one's booked Nuns Cross Farm tonight? Hey, just down the road. Reckon I can get into the porch. If no one's booked it, I'd be gone before anyone knew I was there anyway. Makes no difference. If someone got pissy about it, I suppose I could send them the money for staying for a night. 50 quid or whatever it is. If I think I can go further, which I should, because I'm trying to beat William Crossing here effectively now. Then, I don't know if this is really naive, but like a rural church, a church porch, a churchyard, benches in the churchyard. Doesn't that seem like a romantic, trampy place to sleep that should be fine? And their good Christian spirit will mean they wouldn't even mind if I did get caught in that unlikely event. I don't think a church in the middle of town. I think those spaces might be taken by the actual homeless. Again, I don't know, maybe I'm being naive. But there are 2 very beautiful, quiet little village churches, kind of near Dowsland, that I've been to before. I feel like either one of them would be perfect. I don't know whether I'd be able to get to the porch, but there were like little benches under little trees in the graveyard. It just feels like the sort of place where, you know, people aren't going to be. It's very quiet, respectful. Anyway, those are my options, I think. I don't think any of them are strictly allowed, but hey. No one watches this, so it doesn't really matter, does it? Just don't tell on me and it'll be fine.
Crossing describes his visit to Seward's Cross as being pitch black, so that once they arrived, Humphrey was unable to inspect the ancient monument at all. As I still had the light to film, I was confident that I'd finally overtaken them. And I had no regrets. It was a beautiful moment, with a sharp half-moon glowing in the south against the rich, deep blue of evening over the Dartmoor. Crossing's later years were truly tragic. Sickness and poverty were not a good combination in rural Victorian Devon. In 1924, When he's away from his lodgings in Mary Tavy, a cleaning lady who went to check on his room found a pile of old mouse-eaten papers and chucked them on the fire. They were, of course, Crossing's entire life's work, a vast history of Dartmoor he'd been compiling. Enough to crush anyone. In 1925, in poor health, Crossing spent 12 weeks in the Tavistock institution where his wife had died previously, then was moved to a nursing home in Plymouth paid for by his benefactors. In 1928, aged 80, in absolute poverty, William Crossing passed away. At this point in the walk, Humphrey was literally trying to lie down and fall asleep on the floor. But Crossing's exuberance, complete lack of planning, and seeming inability to consider the needs of his friend meant that they would press on yet further, over the hills towards Dowsland, at least another 5 miles. Crossing's route would have taken him over Down Tor, then up past a farmstead called Kingset, before joining the road near Leathertor Bridge. And, initially, I was happy to attempt the same. A nice bonus being that I stumbled into Hutchinson's Cross, the one that I'd managed to overlook in the Dartmoor Crosses episode I'd made around Easter earlier in the year. I took it as a good omen. Except I should have taken it as a sign I was going the wrong way. Sleepy and stupid and slightly giddily enjoying the novelty of traversing the moor in the dark, I bumbled further off track.
That's probably the last thing you want to see, isn't it? Walking at night.
Crossing didn't have a headlamp, nor even a half moon to guide him, and it must have been a dangerous and chaotic stumble for him and Humphrey. Except somehow, claiming to know his position by the feel of the ground under his feet, he did manage to navigate to his destination. As I staggered about with my map and compass and torch, seemingly walking in circles, looking for a useful landmark, I developed a great respect for Crossing's sense of direction.
What's going on? You need to be heading south-west. That's north. That mast is north of you. So southwest, you dumbass. That way.
I was relieved enough when the black outlines of Down Tor Stone Row appeared against the near black of the sky, and considered myself quite lucky to have even found them. I was going to have to admit defeat. I had enough energy, I felt, to make it to Dowsland, but I couldn't face any more night-time navigation. It was too stressful and dangerous. And besides, I had found myself in the most eerie and magical surrounding. A mystical stone circle, under a sky brimming with stars and bright burning meteorites fizzing frequently overhead. Oh, and this sound.
Spooky.
Sadly, I can't show you how breathtakingly beautiful the night was, as my filming equipment wouldn't pick out the stars. It was gone midnight, and I decided here was as good a place as any, in the lee of the tallest standing stone, to just lie down and try and snooze a little until it was light enough to continue walking.
Shame you can't see the stars. Right, let's try and get a few hours kip somehow.
In the spirit of crossing, I was up at first light to finish my walk. I have no idea how Crossing managed to find a route across Kingset in the dark, as I struggled enough with the stream and the bracken in the light of day. The man had serious navigational chops. He and Humphrey made their way from Dowsland to Cornwall, where they caught a train back to Brent, and Humphrey slept for 2 days. The poor chap didn't even have proper walking boots, and his feet were torn to ribbons. As there's no longer a train station at Cornwood, I find it pretty hard to believe the tiny village ever had a train station. I would be happy with reaching the pair's Dowsland destination as faithfully as I could, then limping to the nearest bus in Yelverton.
Hello. I'm Dartmoor Unicorn, good morning.
What of Crossing's legacy then? It's hard to overestimate. His writings, those that weren't incinerated by an over-enthusiastic housekeeper, contain knowledge of Dartmoor folklore, history, etymology, walking routes and customs that would have been completely lost to time. His utter obsession may have led to his ruin, but we'd all be the poorer without it. And, as I discovered, he was a great navigator and one hell of a hiker. Wherever you are, I hope you'll raise a glass of ale to the memory of great William Crossing, loved and respected by all on the moor. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.